Well, this is our first episode of Fire Talk. Julia, I appreciate you so much for coming down to the office and being willing to talk about your experience. So your house burnt last June, correct?
Last January.
Last January.
Yes.
Okay. And where were you when you found out that your house was on fire?
I was at home. I had had a fire the night before in the fireplace, and my mind just went blank on what happened.
Rekindled?
Yeah, so I had had a fire in the fireplace, and the night before, because it was cold, I was worried if the power went out, that I wasn't gonna have any heat or anything, so I got some fire logs, and then the power stayed on and it was fine, but I decided just to have a fire. It was a cozy atmosphere, put it out, went to bed, and then the next morning I felt like the house was kind of smoky inside a little bit. And I ended up opening the damper in the fireplace, and I think that is just what rekindled it. The firefighter said a little ember just got behind the firebox, I think, and smoke started billowing out of the chimney on the inside of the house, coming out of the walls. And
were you home were you at home alone?
I was, yeah. Me and my 2 dogs and my cat. We were
So
all
what
home.
did you think when you open up the fireplace and it's just filling with smoke?
My first thought was, is this something I can handle on my own? And then I thought, no, I should probably call 911.
And that's what you did? You called the fire department?
I did, yes.
Cool. Cool. So in that situation, how long did it take before the firemen actually responded, before they got there?
It felt like 20 minutes. I have a friend who at the time worked for Carrollton PD, and he said that he actually looked at the records and it was about 3.5 minutes.
Wow, 3.5 minutes. That is pretty good.
Yeah.
That is pretty good. So the fire happens, you call the fire department. How did you get involved with Novo? How did you get introduced to Novo?
So I had initially tried to handle it myself. When I was there, the firefighters who were kind of walking me through next steps, they were saying, call your insurance. I called insurance, they came out, and I was working with the adjuster that they had assigned to me. And for about 4 or 5 months, something like that, I was trying to find contractors, work with contractors. They were trying to compare kind of their estimates with insurance's estimates, and there were discrepancies, and they were trying to reconcile the discrepancies, and we kind of hit a sticking point. And so at that point, I was reaching out to public adjusters, and I found TrueView, and they led me to Novo.
Okay, cool. So when the fire happened, were there any contractors that had come, any restoration guys that had come and tried to talk to you as it was happening?
About 8, yes.
About 8,
yes.
Yeah.
So yes, some seemed more legit than others.
What was that experience like for you?
It was overwhelming. The firefighters had warned me that people would show up and try and offer their services, and I think had put it in my mind. They had very much cautioned me against trusting those people too much.
Okay.
And I think for the most part, they were right, because there were definitely people who came up and definitely seemed to be trying to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
Or seemed to be trying to make a quick buck, because it is the thing where when your house burns down or burns partially down and there are holes in the walls, you need to get that covered up fast.
Right.
Right, for people so they don't, burglarize your house, so that the standing water that the firefighters left behind doesn't freeze, because it's going to be 12 degrees overnight. So there was definitely a sense of urgency that I felt could easily have been exploited.
And let me ask, because you explained the process perfectly. Were you aware that these needed to be boarded up right away, or was this something that maybe a fireman told you?
That was something that came from insurance. The
Okay.
original insurance agent they had assigned to me before my case moved to large claims, she was great. She kind of walked me through what we should need. She ended up calling one of their preferred providers, because at the time I just said, let's use your preferred provider and go with them, because
For the restoration.
Yes, they told me that there would be the mitigation portion, there would be the contents portion, and then the the building, the rebuild portion. And I said, initially for the first one or two, let's just use a preferred provider because it's quicker. I don't have to think about it. And then when it comes time for the rebuild, maybe I'll do a little bit more research. And so the insurance adjuster, kind of walked me through what I would need to do. She called one of their preferred providers and they weren't able to get somebody out, and she ended up escalating it, called a different location. So she was really pushing to get that done fast.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And who was your insurance provider in this?
It was State Farm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did State Farm respond to the claim?
They responded pretty well, I think. They came out pretty quickly. I had a ton of questions, as I always do, and they answered them pretty well, I think. And also, when I finally did get the public adjuster involved, they said that my current agent, sorry, let me turn my phone on, do not disturb.
So the adjuster comes out and they
Yes.
told you
Yes.
your current agent.
Yeah, the public adjuster told me that my current agent was actually pretty reasonable. He said he had most of the stuff in the estimate. It was just a few things that they were kind of fighting over whether or not they wanted to provide. So the experience wasn't bad overall. It's just we did hit that sticking point where we weren't going to be able to find common ground between the contractors that I had found by myself and the insurance adjuster.
And when you say that you guys couldn't find common grounds, was that just price discrepancy? The contractors were asking for more than insurance would provide, or?
It was a little bit of everything. So there were some things, I remember paint being a big thing, where the contractor was saying after fire, you really need 4 coats of paint. You really need, a primer and then 2 coats of paint, or whatever he was saying. And insurance was only wanting to pay for 1 coat of paint. And there were a couple other things where, what's the system that they use for finding like prices of how much things? Xactimate, yeah. So they were talking about the Xactimate system and the prices in there as well. And the contractor was saying, yes, this is the price, but it really should be more, because for the price that they allow, it doesn't allow, I guess, the quality that you need after a fire.
Gotcha. And as far as the whole process goes, from this day of the fire to the end, tell me what your expectations were. Sorry. Tell me the difference between your expectations and the reality of that.
I really didn't know. I was really just kind of surviving 1 minute to the next. The firefighters were like, call your insurance. I called insurance and they were like, these are next steps and these are your options. And I was like, okay, I'll choose an option and then I'll see what they tell me is the next set of options that I can choose. So I didn't have a lot of expectations. I think I did expect for to be able to work with insurance a little bit better, to be able to do the research, ask the questions, and then have insurance kind of take care of it. I didn't expect that I would need to get a public adjuster involved. I think that it was a good thing to do, and I'm glad that I did it, but that's not something that I would have immediately assumed that I needed to do.
Right. Were you even aware of what public adjusters did before this?
I was, mostly because public adjusters had also come to my house along with the contractors on the day of the fire. And I do remember looking back, because I did keep the business cards that were given to me in the packets of information. TrueView did come on the day of the fire, and I quickly shut them out.
Do you remember who it was from TrueView?
I don't, and I wish I did, but I don't remember who it was.
You just got the card.
Yeah, they gave me a card and they gave me a whole folder of information with pamphlets and sheets of information. So it was definitely more information than I got.
And that was
from
probably
anybody else.
Pretty overwhelming, right? When they come up with a pamphlet or a whole book of information for you.
Yeah, and you don't know who you can trust, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Anybody who shows up the day of the fire, and my insurance adjuster kind of steered me away from that as well. He said anybody who's out actively looking for work versus using word of mouth or using their reputation, I don't know. He said kind of that he would distrust those people as well. And maybe in hindsight, that was him trying to steer me away from a public adjuster, I don't know.
Could have been. Julia, so you weren't, or you didn't really have any expectations for the process, which most people don't, because you don't wake up planning on having to reconstruct your burnt house.
Correct.
What advice could you leave for homeowners that maybe have just experienced the fire today?
If it's an immediate fire, I would say rely on your friends and family. They will give you clothes, they will give you toothpaste, they will give you all of these things that you are not supposed to use after a fire. Because even smoke damage can affect things. Everything has to be cleaned, in a specialty way, kind of. So definitely rely on friends and family for, if you can stay with one of them for a night before you go into a hotel, that buys you a little bit of time before you have to make decisions about hotels and all this kind of stuff. My sister was great. She came over immediately and took my dogs to her house, so that was just one less thing I had to worry about the day of the fire. I would also say to take pictures of all of your contents. And what I mean by that is insurance will come through and they'll take pictures of your house. So they'll do 360 pictures of all of your furniture and all that kind of stuff. Open up your drawers, take pictures of your jewelry, take pictures of the clothes that you have, because they might lose things. As happened to me, they lost some of my contents, which did include furniture, and they didn't fight me too hard on getting reimbursed for that, but it was just something else on my plate that I had to do, just a mental load.
Right.
And that's something that people can do even before they have a fire. Take pictures of anything that's valuable. Go through your house periodically and just make note of what you have, because that's something I didn't realize how few of my contents I use on a daily basis until I didn't have them. And I was like, there's a handful of things that I need.
Yeah.
And then I think my last piece of advice would be probably just get a public adjuster from the jump, honestly.
Yeah, and so obviously the public adjuster helped you maximize your claim. What else did they really help you with?
They helped with some of the mental load and some of the research that I did.
Okay, so they helped you kind of understand what was going to happen and who was going to do what?
They did, because before I hired them, I was trying to find contractors, and I was like, well, people were recommending that I get a fire certified contractor or whatever the language was, and so it's a specific type of contractor, and then you've got to kind of vet the contractor yourself. And same with the contents, was I was trying to decide who I want to take care of my contents and who I want to do all of these things for me. And when I got TrueView involved, they were like, we work with Novo a lot, they're really good. They showed me a picture or several pictures of a house that they had just restored. So I was kind of able to see their work. I trusted the public adjuster, and then I trusted his recommendations from there.
That's awesome. And tell me about your experience with Novo.
It's been good. It's been good, especially I will call out Anel. I texted him 9 p.m., 10 p.m., probably later sometimes, just with like, hey, I've got this thought, I need to get it out before I go to sleep or something like that. Yeah. So Anel was to the point where I felt bad sometimes. I was like, I hope I'm not making him work, like on the weekends when he's not working. So it was good. It's been responsive. They were fast, because since I did get the public adjuster involved so late in the game, we kind of had a rush to the finish. We only had about 4.5 months to finish my house.
Wow.
Basically from scratch.
And what was the timer on that timeline? Why did it have to be finished in 4.5 months?
Because insurance was not going to renew my lease
Okay.
on the rental house.
Gotcha. So you only had, you were essentially going to run out of your ALE coverage.
I believe so, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Would you do, well, let's ask this differently. If, God forbid, the house we just restored caught on fire again, what would you do differently this time?
I want to make a really dark joke, but I won't. And then I want to make a second dark joke and say I would just let the house burn down completely. But I won't say that either. I would get a public adjuster immediately. Probably the same ones, probably TrueView again.
And why TrueView?
When I first called Ryan from TrueView, he immediately, I was like, I've got some questions. I don't know where to begin. I've been trying, to work with insurance. They haven't been super cooperative with me. And I called him and I talked, and he just talked to me for probably 25 minutes. So there was no sense of urgency. There was no just like, trust us, hire us, trust us, we know what we're doing. He wanted to make sure all of my questions were answered, which is, I ask a lot of questions to everybody about everything because I want to know. And that is super important to me, that somebody will answer questions, that they take the time to educate. And so Ryan was my first point of contact after the day of the fire. And so he was great. I did work with another public adjuster at TrueView before I ended up with Chris. Mm-hmm. And she was a little bit less responsive. And then I think she ultimately quit.
Oh.
Or otherwise left the company. And then they transferred my case over to Chris. And Chris has been great. Same thing where I email him and I've got an email back in 5 minutes, which is never expected, but is always appreciated.
Yeah, of course. Especially in today's world, people are slow to respond. So
Yeah.
it's very, it's the word I'm looking for. It's very warming to hear that our vendors, well, the people we work alongside with, were able to take care of you as good as we were. That's very, very warming to hear.
Yeah, it's definitely a very vulnerable time, just in not knowing, okay, like everything is in transition. I'm in a hotel right now. At some point I'll move to a rental house. I'm in a rental house. At some point my house will be done. I don't know what I'm doing with, getting my utilities turned off. I don't know what I'm doing with, that is something I'll back up to your previous question about what to tell homeowners. Utilities were a big thing for me. So obviously you've got electricity, you've got water at your house. What I did, which I would not recommend, is the firefighters pulled the meter for everything, and they drained the water from my toilets and everything because it was freezing. I wasn't going to have water, and so they pulled everything. They stopped everything, and I thought that turned off my utilities. And then I ended up still paying the base rate for my electricity.
Interesting.
And I ended up paying, at one point, the city continued to bill me. I guess they have a base cost or price or fee or whatever for.
Do you remember what that was?
It was like $80 a month.
Okay.
It was not a small fee.
Yeah.
For electricity, I think it was like $5 a month or something. And I thought those utilities had been turned off, so I ended up calling, when I got into my rental house, I called a company to set up utilities there. So I was actually paying for 2 sets of utilities.
Oh my gosh, they didn't tell you when you called to set up the second account? They didn't tell you that?
I called a different company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was just me thinking the utilities had been turned off at my old house.
Oh, it makes sense. They pulled the meter. You would think that.
Right, if you're not using anything.
Yeah.
So that was something, and I don't know if I was missing the bills or if I was overlooking all of them for 7 months, but I had about a $700 bill.
Wow.
For water, and then for electricity, I had my new provider transferred to my old house once I moved back in, and then I realized I hadn't disconnected the old services, and they charged me about a $400 cancellation fee.
Wow.
So definitely, I wish somebody had told me how to handle utilities on the day of the fire.
And I'm glad that you went back to that, because that's a big
Yes,
deal. Yeah, I mean,
yes.
Nearly $1,000 at the end of the day it cost.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with the fire, there are so many unexpected costs that you don't think about.
Right.
That just pop up here and there, and they can be small, but they add up. So utilities, I did not love having to pay for all of those previous months.
Yeah. And so the house originally burnt in January. How long was it start to finish?
January 17th, and I think I got the keys back on the 21st of December. So it was over 11 months. And then from there, I just slowly moved into the house, and I didn't actually start living there until early January, so almost a full year.
And when you started working with Novo, what expectation did they set for you as far as how long this would take?
They said that they could get it done in about 4 months. So I think by the end of the year, I think is what they said.
Right. But Novo didn't come into the picture until which month?
June,
Okay.
I think late, I want to say June.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, Julia, I don't have any more questions for you. We've covered all the topics we need to cover today, but I want to thank you again for your time and your attention, and also sharing your experiences with me and with the future homeowners that are going to be watching this. It was I didn't personally get to work with you as much as I wish I could have, but it was a true pleasure meeting you today. And again, thank you for being a part of Fire Talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.